I gave my closest friend a place to stay, but she started dating my ex and crossing the line. However, I found out that he dumped her, and I wrote to her. I never thought I'd find myself in this situation, but here I am, sharing the mess that my life has become. It all started about a year ago when my best friend Amanda went through a devastating divorce. She and I had been inseparable for over a decade, ever since we met at a college networking event. Amanda has always been like a sister to me, and when her marriage to Eric fell apart, there was no question in my mind that I'd do whatever I could to help her. Amanda was completely blindsided by the divorce. Eric left her without warning, and it shattered her. She didn't have anywhere to go. Her family lived across the country, and she felt too embarrassed to reach out to our mutual friends, afraid they'd side with Eric. I couldn't let her go through it alone. So, without hesitation, I offered her my apartment. It's small, just a one-bedroom, but we figured out a way to make it work. When Amanda moved in, she was a shell of herself. She brought nothing but 2 suitcases and a box of random kitchen gadgets. She looked lost, fragile, like she'd been gutted. I told her not to worry about anything except getting back on her feet. For the first couple of weeks, she barely left the couch. I'd come home from work and find her buried under a blanket, surrounded by empty tissue boxes. She cried almost constantly, her sobs filling every corner of the apartment. I didn't mind at first. It felt good to be there for her, to cook her meals, bring her tea, and just sit with her while she let it all out. She was grieving the life she thought she'd have, and I understood that. I paid for her first few therapy sessions, which were pricey, over $200 each, but I knew how much she needed it. I thought she'd only need a handful, just enough to get through the worst of it, but weeks turned into months, and the bills kept piling up. At the same time, I was doing everything I could to keep things running smoothly. I took on extra hours at work to cover our expenses since Amanda wasn't working. I'd come home exhausted, only to find that she hadn't done much all day. The dishes would pile up in the sink, the apartment would be a mess, and she'd still be in the same sweatpants she wore the day before. I tried to be patient, reminding myself that she was going through a lot, but it was starting to wear on me. Eventually, I helped Amanda get a job at a local boutique. It wasn't her dream job, but it was something to get her out of the apartment and earning money. She seemed excited at first, and I thought it would be a turning point for her. But after a few weeks, she started calling in sick or showing up late. The boutique manager, who happened to be a friend of mine, called me one evening to let me know that Amanda wasn't pulling her weight. I was embarrassed, but I didn't say anything to Amanda. I didn't want to push her too hard and risk undoing the progress she'd made in therapy. As time went on, the dynamic between us shifted. Amanda started to take my generosity for granted. She'd casually ask me to cover her share of the bills, promising to pay me back soon, but the payments never came. I didn't mind helping her out in the beginning, but it was becoming clear that she wasn't making much of an effort to stand on her own. It felt like I was carrying the weight of both our lives, and she didn't even notice. One night, after I'd spent hours cleaning the apartment while Amanda sat on the couch scrolling through her phone, I finally snapped. I told her I needed her to step up, to contribute more, and to take her responsibilities seriously. She looked at me like I'd just slapped her. "I thought you understood what I'm going through," she said, her voice trembling. I tried to explain that I wasn't asking for much, just some basic effort, but she stormed off to the bedroom and slammed the door. The tension between us grew after that. Amanda became increasingly defensive, accusing me of being unsupportive and selfish. She'd say things like, "You don't know what it's like to lose everything," or, "I thought you were my friend." It hurt because I'd done everything I could to help her, and it felt like she didn't appreciate any of it. Then there was the issue of her therapy. I'd continued paying for her sessions, thinking they were helping her process her emotions and rebuild her confidence. But one day, I found a receipt in her bag for a spa treatment, a luxury facial that cost nearly as much as one of her therapy sessions. When I confronted her about it, she brushed it off, saying she needed it to feel like herself again. I was furious. I'd been scraping by to support both of us, and she was spending money on facials? The breaking point came when I overheard her on the phone with her sister, laughing about how easy she had it living with me. She joked about how I was too nice to say no, and how she didn't have to worry about anything because I'd take care of it. Hearing her talk about me like that, after everything I'd done for her, was like a punch to the gut. I confronted her that night. I told her I couldn't keep living like this, that I needed her to start pulling her weight or find somewhere else to stay. She accused me of being heartless, of kicking her out when she had nowhere to go. I felt awful, but I couldn't ignore how toxic our arrangement had become. She packed her things and left the next day, slamming the door behind her without so much as a thank you. Hi Reddit. If you read my first post, you'll know how much I sacrificed for Amanda, my best friend of over a decade, while she went through her messy divorce. I thought we had an unshakable bond, something that could survive anything. But apparently, I was wrong. This is the part of the story where everything unraveled, and I realized Amanda wasn't just ungrateful. She was downright deceitful. It started subtly, so much so that I didn't notice at first. Amanda had been living with me for a couple of months when she seemed to perk up. She was still a mess in many ways, barely contributing to rent, ducking chores, but emotionally, she seemed lighter. She'd smile more often, her mood would brighten unexpectedly, and I'd catch her giggling at her phone like a teenager. I was relieved, thinking the therapy I'd been paying for was finally working. One evening, as we were sitting on the couch, she mentioned Josh. My stomach dropped the second his name left her mouth. Josh was my ex-boyfriend, and we had a messy history. We'd been together for 3 years, and our breakup wasn't just hard. It was catastrophic. He cheated on me, lied about it, and then gaslit me when I confronted him. To this day, I consider him the most toxic person I've ever let into my life. I hadn't talked to him in years, but the mere mention of his name brought all those feelings rushing back. Amanda brought him up casually, saying, "Remember Josh? You dated him for a while, right?" Her tone was nonchalant, almost too casual, like she was testing the waters. I nodded, trying to keep my expression neutral. "Yeah," I said. "Why do you ask?" She shrugged, staring at her phone. "I ran into him the other day. We got to talking, and he seemed different. More grown up, you know?" I felt a pang of discomfort but brushed it off. Josh was ancient history, and Amanda knew everything he'd put me through. There was no way she'd entertain anything more than a passing conversation with him. Or so I thought. Over the next few weeks, Amanda's mood swings became even more noticeable. She'd disappear for hours without explanation, always claiming she was at therapy or meeting a friend. I didn't think much of it at first. I figured she was finally rebuilding her life, making new connections, and getting back on her feet. But something didn't sit right with me. She'd come back from these outings looking different, almost glowing. I chalked it up to her newfound independence and didn't press her for details. One night, while scrolling through my social media feed, I noticed something strange. Josh had started following Amanda on Instagram. My heart sank. I hadn't thought about him in years, but seeing his name pop up in connection with Amanda sent a chill down my spine. I told myself it was a coincidence. Maybe their chance meeting had been completely innocent. Maybe I was overreacting. But then the pieces started falling into place. Amanda's secretive behavior, her sudden mood shifts, the way she'd quickly hide her phone whenever I walked into the room. It all pointed to something more. Still, I didn't want to jump to conclusions. After everything Amanda had been through, I didn't want to accuse her of something so terrible without proof. That proof came a few days later. Amanda had left her phone on the kitchen counter while she was in the shower. I wasn't proud of it, but curiosity and a nagging sense of betrayal got the better of me. I unlocked her phone. She told me her passcode months ago when she asked me to take pictures at a party, and opened her messages. My heart sank as I scrolled through the chat history between her and Josh. It wasn't just flirty banter. It was full-blown romance. They'd been seeing each other for weeks, sneaking around behind my back. The messages were sickeningly sweet. Josh calling her babe, Amanda telling him how much she missed him, and the two of them planning their next date night. There were even a few explicit messages that made my stomach churn. It wasn't just a casual fling. It was a full-on relationship. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. This wasn't just some random betrayal. This was Amanda, my best friend, and Josh, the man who had broken me. They both knew what they were doing. They both knew how much this would hurt me, and they did it anyway. I confronted Amanda that night. I waited until she came out of the shower, her face glowing like she didn't have a care in the world. I was sitting at the kitchen table, her phone in front of me. She froze when she saw it, her expression shifting from confusion to panic. "What's this?" I asked, my voice trembling as I held up the phone. "You and Josh? Seriously, Amanda?" She stammered, trying to come up with an excuse, but I didn't let her. "You knew what he did to me," I said, my voice rising. "You knew how much he hurt me, and you went behind my back and started dating him?" Her face crumpled, and for a moment, I thought she was going to apologize. But instead, she doubled down. "It's not what you think," she said, her voice defensive. "Josh has changed. He's not the same person he was when you dated him." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "That doesn't matter," I shouted. "You lied to me. You've been sneaking around with my ex-boyfriend while I've been paying your bills and helping you get your life together." Do you even understand how messed up that is? Amanda's eyes filled with tears, but I didn't feel sorry for her. She tried to turn it around on me, accusing me of being controlling and overreacting. She said she didn't owe me an explanation for her personal life and that I needed to let go of the past. I couldn't take it anymore. I told her to pack her things and leave. I couldn't have her in my apartment, not after everything she'd done. She begged me to reconsider, saying she had nowhere else to go, but I stood my ground. She betrayed my trust in the worst possible way, and I couldn't forgive her for that. Amanda moved out a few days later. I haven't spoken to her since, and honestly, I don't think I ever will. Losing her as a friend has been painful, but I can't keep someone like that in my life. As for Josh, I blocked him on everything and made it clear I never wanted to hear from him again. It's been a few months now, and I'm still trying to make sense of it all. I keep asking myself how I didn't see it coming, how I let myself be blindsided by two people I thought I could trust. Part of me wonders if I could have handled things differently, but deep down, I know I made the right choice. Some betrayals are unforgivable, and this was one of them. After days of stewing in anger and disbelief, I decided I couldn't let this go unresolved. Amanda and Josh had been sneaking around behind my back, and while I'd already told Amanda to leave my apartment, I realized I hadn't truly confronted her about the depth of her betrayal. I also hadn't spoken to Josh since discovering their relationship, and I needed to hear from both of them, if only to confirm what I already knew. It was like picking at a wound I couldn't let heal. Amanda agreed to meet me at a coffee shop near my apartment. I chose a public place on purpose. I didn't trust myself to stay calm if we were alone. She showed up wearing a bright yellow sundress, her face glowing with the same carefree confidence that had infuriated me during our last conversation. It was like she didn't have a single ounce of guilt about what she'd done. "Hey," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. She sounded so casual, so normal, like we were just catching up after a regular day. I didn't waste any time. "Why?" I asked, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to keep it steady. "Why would you do this to me?" Amanda sighed, like she was the one who'd been wronged. "Lindsay, I didn't mean for it to happen," she said. "It just did." Josh and I clicked. "We understand each other in a way I don't think you ever understood him." Her words hit me like a slap. "I don't understand him?" "Amanda, do you even remember why we broke up? He cheated on me. He lied to me for months, and when I confronted him, he made me feel like I was the crazy one. He broke me." Amanda waved her hand dismissively, as if I were overreacting to ancient history. "That was years ago," she said. "People change. He's different now. He's been really good to me." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Do you even hear yourself?" I asked, my voice rising. "You're defending a man who destroyed me, and you're doing it while sitting across from me, like this is some casual disagreement we can just talk through." Amanda crossed her arms, her expression hardening. "You're being overly dramatic, Lindsay," she said. "I didn't set out to hurt you, but you don't own Josh. You can't dictate who I date." I stared at her, stunned by her audacity. "This isn't about owning Josh," I said. "This is about respect. You were supposed to be my best friend. How could you betray me like this?" She rolled her eyes, and for the first time, I saw the Amanda I hadn't wanted to admit existed, the Amanda who could justify anything as long as it suited her. "I'm sorry you feel that way," she said, her tone cold and dismissive. "But I don't regret being with Josh. He makes me happy." I felt tears welling up in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "You don't regret it?" I asked. "Not even a little? After everything I've done for you, everything I sacrificed to help you get back on your feet, you don't feel the slightest bit guilty?" Amanda didn't answer. She just sat there, staring at me with a mix of defiance and indifference. It was like she didn't even recognize the person who had taken her in, paid her bills, and stood by her when no one else would. At that moment, I realized I wasn't just angry. I was heartbroken. I'd lost my best friend, not because of Josh, but because of who she'd become, or maybe who she'd always been. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "We're done, Amanda," I said. "I don't want to see you again. Don't call me, don't text me, and don't come near me." Amanda didn't try to stop me. She just watched as I walked out of the coffee shop, her expression unreadable. Part of me hoped she'd call out to me, apologize, say something to fix what she'd broken, but she didn't. She let me go. Later that evening, I got a text from Josh. I hadn't planned on talking to him. I didn't think he deserved the time or energy, but curiosity got the better of me. His message was short and smug. "Amanda told me you're upset. I think we should talk." I wanted to ignore him, but the thought of leaving things unresolved ate at me. I agreed to meet him the next day at a park near his apartment. I figured if I was going to end this chapter of my life, I needed to confront both of them. When I arrived, Josh was already there, leaning against a tree with that same cocky smirk I remembered from our relationship. He looked almost exactly the same. Dark hair, sharp jawline, the kind of face that made you want to trust him even when you knew better. "Hey," he said, flashing me a grin. "You look good." I ignored the compliment. "Why did you agree to meet me?" I asked, crossing my arms. What could you possibly have to say that I'd want to hear? Josh shrugged, his smirk never wavering. "I just thought we could clear the air. Amanda told me you were upset about us, and I don't want there to be any bad blood." I couldn't believe his audacity. "Bad blood?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You dated me for 3 years, cheated on me, and now you're with my best friend. And you think we can just clear the air?" Josh rolled his eyes. "Lindsay, you're being overly emotional," he said. "What happened between us was a long time ago. Amanda and I didn't plan this. It just happened. And honestly, I don't think you have the right to be mad. You're not exactly the easiest person to deal with." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd expected him to deny, deflect, maybe even apologize. But instead, he turned it around on me, making me feel like I was the one in the wrong. I stood there, staring at him, trying to find the right words. But nothing I said would matter. Josh wasn't sorry, and Amanda didn't care. They both knew exactly what they were doing, and they didn't think they owed me anything. I turned and walked away, my chest tightening with every step. By the time I got home, I felt like I could barely breathe. The weight of their betrayal, their indifference, was suffocating. I blocked both of their numbers that night, deleted them from my social media, and told myself I'd never look back. But even now, months later, I can't shake the pain of what they did. Losing Amanda felt like losing a piece of myself, and confronting Josh only reminded me of the damage he'd already done. After the confrontation with Amanda and Josh, I thought the worst was behind me. I had blocked both of them and told myself I was done with their drama. But it turns out, they weren't done with me. Amanda, true to form, had been spinning her version of events to our mutual friends, painting herself as the victim. According to her, I was controlling and overly emotional and couldn't handle the fact that she had found happiness after her divorce. I found this out the hard way during a brunch with a few of our mutual friends, Rachel, Greg, and Emily. Rachel and Emily had been my closest confidants during Amanda's divorce, always supporting me as I took on the burden of helping her rebuild her life. Greg was a newer addition to the group, someone Amanda had introduced us to a few months before her split from Eric. At first, brunch was normal, mimosas, laughter, the usual catching up. But then Greg brought up Amanda. "I saw Amanda and Josh the other day," he said, sipping his drink. "They looked so happy together. Honestly, I think they're good for each other." My stomach churned, but I stayed silent, hoping someone else would steer the conversation in a different direction. Instead, Rachel chimed in, her tone cautious. "I mean, Lindsay, I get why you're upset," she said. "But don't you think maybe it's time to move on? Amanda's been through so much, and if Josh makes her happy." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Rachel, who had listened to me cry about Josh for hours after our breakup, was now defending him. And Amanda, the person who had betrayed me. "Move on," I repeated, my voice shaking. "She lied to me. They both did. This isn't about them finding happiness. It's about basic decency." Greg shrugged. "I don't think it's fair to hold her divorce over her head. She's trying to rebuild her life, and maybe Josh is part of that." At that moment, I realized how deeply Amanda's narrative had taken hold. She'd framed herself as the phoenix rising from the ashes of her marriage, and I was just the bitter friend trying to drag her back down. I turned to Emily, hoping for some support, but she just looked uncomfortable and stared at her plate. "I can't believe this," I said, standing up from the table. "Do you even care about what I've been through? Or does Amanda's sob story erase everything she's done to me?" Rachel looked like she wanted to say something, but I didn't give her the chance. I grabbed my bag and left, my face burning with humiliation and anger. As I walked home, I replayed the conversation in my head, my disbelief turning into a sickening realization. Amanda had successfully turned some of our friends against me. Over the next few weeks, the cracks in our group deepened. Emily called me a few days after the brunch, apologizing for not standing up for me. "I just didn't want to take sides," she said. "But I think what Amanda did was wrong." Her words were little comfort. "Not taking sides is taking a side," I told her. "By staying silent, you're letting her get away with it." Emily promised to do better, but her hesitation had already planted seeds of doubt in my mind. Meanwhile, Rachel and Greg seemed to fully align with Amanda and Josh. I heard through mutual friends that they'd been hanging out as a group, posting pictures of game nights and dinners on social media. It felt like a slap in the face every time I saw one of those posts. I tried to remind myself that I didn't want to be part of a group that would defend Amanda's actions, but it still hurt to feel so excluded. Things came to a head at a birthday party for one of our mutual friends, Katie. I debated whether to go, knowing Amanda and Josh would probably be there, but Katie and I had been close for years, and I didn't want to let Amanda's presence keep me from celebrating her birthday. When I arrived, the atmosphere was tense. Half the room seemed to light up when they saw me, while the other half avoided eye contact. Sure enough, Amanda and Josh were there, sitting together on the couch like the perfect couple. Amanda didn't even look my way, but Josh smirked when our eyes met, as if he was daring me to make a scene. I avoided them as much as I could, sticking to the people I knew were on my side: Emily, Katie, and a few others. But the division in the room was palpable. It was like there were two separate parties happening in the same space, and I couldn't help but feel like an outsider in a group that had once felt like family. The breaking point came when Greg made a toast. He raised his glass, smiling at Amanda and Josh. "To new beginnings," he said, his voice dripping with smugness. "And to finding happiness, no matter what anyone else thinks." I felt my blood boil. It was a direct jab at me, and everyone in the room knew it. Before I could stop myself, I stood up. "You're right, Greg," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "Here's to happiness, just not at the expense of other people's trust." The room went silent. Amanda finally looked at me, her expression a mix of shock and irritation. "Lindsay, this isn't the time or place," she said, her voice low. I laughed bitterly. "Oh, now you care about timing? Where was that consideration when you were sneaking around with Josh behind my back?" Josh stood up, his smirk replaced by a scowl. "You're making a scene," he said. "Maybe it's time you let this go." "Let it go?" I snapped. "You two lied to me, betrayed me, and now you want to act like I'm the problem? I'm done with all of you." I grabbed my coat and left, tears streaming down my face as I walked out the door. That night, I made a decision. I couldn't stay in this friend group. The lines had been drawn, and too many people had chosen Amanda and Josh over me. It wasn't worth the pain of trying to hold onto relationships that had been so easily discarded. Over the next few weeks, I quietly distanced myself from the group. I stopped attending gatherings, muted their posts on social media, and focused on rebuilding my life without them. Emily reached out a few times, apologizing again and saying she missed me, but I couldn't bring myself to trust her. The betrayal had cut too deep, and I needed a clean break. Walking away wasn't easy. There were moments when I felt incredibly lonely, mourning not just Amanda but the entire friend group that had been such a big part of my life. But as time passed, I began to feel lighter. Without the constant drama and toxicity, I had space to focus on myself and the people who truly cared about me. Hi Reddit. This will probably be the last time I share this part of my life because I finally moved on from the chaos Amanda and Josh brought into it. After months of heartbreak, betrayal, and cutting ties with a toxic friend group, I finally realized it was time to focus on myself. I was done letting their actions define my life and decided to channel all that hurt into building something better. It started small. I'm not going to lie. Those first few weeks after distancing myself from the friend group were lonely. Without the constant social gatherings and shared routines, my life felt eerily quiet. But instead of sitting in that silence and wallowing, I started filling it with things I'd always wanted to do but never made time for. The first thing I did was throw myself into work. I work in marketing at a mid-sized agency, and for years, I'd been stuck in a rut. I was good at my job, but I'd never pushed for more. After everything with Amanda and Josh, I realized how much of myself I'd given away to other people. It was time to start putting that energy into something that could actually pay off. So, I began taking on bigger projects, volunteering for leadership roles, and even staying late to perfect campaigns that weren't technically my responsibility. My boss, Sarah, took notice almost immediately. One afternoon, Sarah called me into her office. She's one of those effortlessly intimidating women who always looks like she just walked out of a boardroom in New York, but she'd always been kind to me. "Lindsay," she said, gesturing for me to sit, "I've been really impressed with your work lately. You've stepped up in a way that hasn't gone unnoticed." I felt a mix of pride and nerves as she continued. "We're restructuring some of the leadership roles in the team," she said, "and I think you'd be a great fit for a senior account manager position." I was stunned. Me? A senior account manager? It felt surreal, especially after the year I'd had. I thanked her profusely, and by the time I left her office, I felt like I was walking on air. That promotion was the first real sign that my life was moving forward, away from the wreckage Amanda and Josh had left behind. With my professional life on track, I decided to focus on my personal life. For years, I told myself I didn't have time for hobbies, but now I realized I'd just been making excuses. I signed up for a pottery class at a local studio, a decision that felt a little random but turned out to be one of the best I'd ever made. The instructor, a woman named Carla, was warm and encouraging, and the other students quickly became like a second family. One of those students was a guy named Ryan. He was a few years older than me, with a quick wit and an infectious laugh. At first, we just chatted casually during class, but over time, our conversations grew longer and deeper. He told me he'd taken up pottery after a rough breakup, and I felt an instant connection. Here was someone who understood heartbreak and was trying to build something beautiful out of it, literally and figuratively. One night after class, Ryan asked if I wanted to grab a drink. We ended up at a cozy little bar down the street, talking for hours about everything from our favorite books to our worst dates. For the first time in a long time, I felt genuinely happy. Not the fleeting, surface-level happiness that comes from distraction, but the kind that settles deep in your chest and makes you feel like you're going to be okay. As my relationship with Ryan blossomed, I also started expanding my social circle. I joined a book club through a local library where I met some incredible women who were nothing like the toxic friends I'd left behind. There was Maya, a single mom with a wicked sense of humor, and Elise, an artist who always had paint smudges on her hands. These women became my lifeline, showing me what true friendship looked like: supportive, uplifting, and without ulterior motives. But just when I thought I'd closed the Amanda chapter of my life for good, she reappeared in the form of a letter. I found it one evening after work, tucked into my mailbox. My stomach clenched as I saw her familiar handwriting on the envelope. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity got the better of me. The letter was 3 pages long, written in Amanda's neat, looping script. She apologized for everything, betraying me, lying to me, and letting our friendship fall apart. She admitted that her relationship with Josh had started out of desperation and loneliness, and that she'd been too proud to see how much it was hurting me. She even acknowledged how unfair it had been to drag our mutual friends into the mess, fracturing the group beyond repair. At the end of the letter, she wrote, "I don't expect you to forgive me, Lindsay, but I needed to say all of this, even if it's too late." I sat there staring at the letter, feeling a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, and maybe even a flicker of pity. But what I didn't feel was the need to respond. Amanda's apology didn't change what she'd done or erase the pain she'd caused. And as much as part of me wanted to believe she'd changed, I couldn't risk reopening that door. So, I folded the letter, put it back in the envelope, and tucked it into the bottom of my desk drawer. Maybe one day I'd throw it out, but for now, it was enough to let it sit there, untouched and unanswered. Life moved on. Ryan and I grew closer, and I started to feel like myself again. Or maybe a new version of myself, stronger and more resilient. The pain Amanda and Josh had caused hadn't disappeared, but it had faded into the background, replaced by new experiences, new friendships, and a renewed sense of purpose. Hi, Reddit. I thought I was done talking about Amanda and Josh. I had moved on with my life, focusing on my work, new hobbies, and the amazing people I'd met along the way. But life has a funny way of bringing things full circle. Even though I had closed that chapter, I couldn't help but hear about the fallout that followed my departure from that toxic friend group. It turns out that Amanda and Josh's betrayal wasn't the end of their drama. It was only the beginning. After Amanda and I cut ties, she and Josh continued their relationship. From what I heard through mutual acquaintances, they were inseparable at first, flaunting their new romance at every opportunity. They attended parties together, posted couple photos on social media, and acted like they were living in some fairy tale. But behind the scenes, things weren't so rosy. Josh's reputation had always been a little shaky. Even back when we were together, I noticed how he had a way of twisting situations to suit his narrative. He'd charm his way out of any conflict, leaving others to clean up the mess. But his true colors started to show more prominently once he and Amanda became a couple. The first cracks appeared when Josh began flirting with another woman in their friend group, a woman named Sophia. Sophia was known for being outgoing and bubbly, but she also had a sharp sense of humor and didn't tolerate nonsense. From what I heard, she initially dismissed Josh's advances, thinking he was just being friendly. But as his comments became more suggestive and his attention more obvious, Sophia started to feel uncomfortable. She confronted him at a party one night, in front of several other friends. "Josh, don't you think it's a little inappropriate to act like this when you're with Amanda?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. Josh laughed it off, claiming she was reading too much into things, but Sophia wasn't having it. "Maybe Amanda doesn't mind, but I do," she said, walking away. That incident sparked whispers among the group. People started questioning Josh's behavior, wondering if he was as devoted to Amanda as he pretended to be. Amanda, for her part, seemed oblivious, or maybe she just didn't want to see the truth. She continued to defend Josh, even as more stories about his manipulative tendencies came to light. One of the most damning revelations came from Greg, the same Greg who had sided with Amanda and Josh during my fallout with the group. Greg and Josh had been close friends, but their relationship soured after Josh borrowed a significant amount of money from Greg under the guise of needing it for emergency expenses. Months went by, and Josh made no effort to repay him. When Greg finally pressed him about it, Josh brushed him off, saying, "You've got a good job, man. You'll be fine." Greg, furious, started sharing his story with others in the group. As more people spoke up, a pattern emerged. Josh had a history of using people, whether for money, favors, or emotional support, and discarding them once they were no longer useful. The group, once so tightly knit, began to unravel as people took sides. Some, like Sophia and Greg, distanced themselves from Josh entirely, while others, like Rachel, continued to defend him, insisting he was just misunderstood. Amanda, meanwhile, seemed to grow more isolated. Her relationship with Josh had alienated her from many of her old friends, and his growing unpopularity didn't help matters. I heard through the grapevine that she tried to host a dinner party at her apartment, but only a handful of people showed up. Even Rachel, her most loyal defender, declined at the last minute, citing work commitments. It was a far cry from the lively gatherings Amanda used to throw, back when she was the center of our social circle. Things came to a head when Josh started dating another woman from the group. While still with Amanda, her name was Vanessa, and she was relatively new to the circle, having joined through Rachel. Vanessa was younger, ambitious, and by all accounts, completely unaware of Josh's history. They started spending more time together under the guise of working on a project, and before long, their affair was an open secret. When Amanda found out, she was devastated. I wasn't there to witness the fallout, but Emily, one of the few people from the group I still spoke to occasionally, filled me in. Amanda confronted Josh at another party, screaming at him in front of everyone. "I gave up everything for you," she shouted. "My friends, my reputation. You ruined my life." Josh, true to form, played the victim. "Don't blame me for your choices," he said coolly. "You knew what you were getting into." That was the moment Amanda finally realized what everyone else had already seen. Josh cared about no one but himself. She left the party in tears, and from what Emily told me, that was the last time most of the group saw her. In the weeks that followed, Josh's reputation continued to deteriorate. Vanessa broke things off with him after learning the full extent of his manipulative behavior. Greg and Sophia started actively warning others in the group about him, sharing stories of how he'd lied, cheated, and exploited people for years. One by one, his friends stopped returning his calls and inviting him to events. By the time his birthday rolled around, the only people who showed up to his party were Rachel and a couple of casual acquaintances. As for Amanda, she disappeared almost entirely. She deleted her social media accounts, stopped attending group gatherings, and eventually moved to another city. Emily told me she'd heard Amanda was trying to start fresh, working a new job and keeping to herself. I couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy for her. Despite everything she'd done, no one deserved to be left so isolated. But at the same time, I knew her choices had led her to this point. Hearing about all of this was strangely cathartic. I hadn't sought revenge against Josh or Amanda. I'd simply walked away and focused on rebuilding my life. But knowing that their actions had finally caught up to them felt like a confirmation that I'd made the right choice. They had created their own chaos, and now they were living with the consequences.